All right, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome back to Music Forward's Music Industry Sessions. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is DeMarco White, and I am the Institutional Partnerships Manager for Music Forward. For those of you joining us for the first time, Music Forward is a national nonprofit organization inside the House of Blues and Live Nation family. And our mission is to transform young lives, inspire careers, and champion a more inclusive music industry. We provide artist development and career development programs for you to inspire the next generation of leaders and innovators. So we welcome all the young people in our audience today, here to learn from an experienced group of professionals that are doing great work in the music industry. A little bit of housekeeping before we get started. One is, as you all know, we encourage you to ask questions to our panelists. Enter your questions into our Q&A box, and I'll be sure to weave them throughout our conversation today. Also, our chat is open, and we really encourage you all to network with each other and with our panelists and comment on the things that are being said in today's session. And finally, at the end of the session, you'll be prompted to complete a survey where we'd love to get your feedback and learn more about your interest to plan future sessions. We right now are planning for our spring industry session. So if you did not see something this fall that you'd love to see in the spring, please recommend that in our survey today, and we'd love to plan to have it in 2021. So without further ado, I'm really excited to have today's professionals here to talk about their amazing careers and really talk about everything music and analytics. So I'm going to bring our industry experts on screen right now for some introductions. So Julien, Kristin, please join me. Yes. There you go. All right. Hi, Kristin. Hi, Julien. How are you?
Hi.
Hey. I'm so excited to have you all here today. I think that today's conversation, as we said before, is going to go all over the place, but in a very good way. We know that what drives success in the music industry is not only a great personality, but also data and analytics. And that is where we're able to really strategize when it comes to the myriad of brands and artists and different components around that within the industry. So before we get into any of that, Julien, please introduce yourself to our audience today and also share a little bit about your expertise that you bring to the conversation.
Absolutely. So my name is Julien. I live in New York City. I moved here 6 years ago to join a music analytics startup called Next Big Sound. Then Next Big Sound got acquired by Pandora, where I am today. And my role is being a product manager. So the role is to define the what and the why of what we do for creators and artists and labels. So really helping them reach Pandora's audience with their music and also helping them promote their careers outside of the platform to their fans listening to them.
Thank you. And Kristin?
Hi, I'm Kristin Juel. I started Juel Concepts 7 years ago, and we are focused on building independent artist careers. So I have a 25-year background in advertising and brand strategy in New York and Los Angeles, and decided to switch gears a little bit and try and help the independent artists actually build their catalog and build their IP.
So before we get into how analytics plays a role in your careers and the advice that we have for our audience today on how to best utilize it, I want to dive deeper into how you all found yourselves in the success in your careers where you are today. And Kristin, we'll start with you. You shared a little bit just now about how you started in marketing and advertising. So is that something that you always knew that you were going to do? And how did you what was your first opportunity into marketing and advertising?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I wish that Music Forward existed when I was growing up. Let me just say that, because I had no idea that you could do this for a living. And I honestly didn't even know you could do this for a living probably until 7 years ago. I started in advertising because I have a creative background. So I like to write and very creative. I played music, I played French horn, I played guitar, I DJ, all that good stuff. But I had that career, that trajectory, that just propulses you into like a certain area, and you're like, oh my God, I'm making good money, I'm doing really well, it's super creative, advertising is amazing. And it wasn't until I started thinking about how can you use music through the brand lens where I started to think there's a lot of opportunity that people aren't really tapping into. So affinity, advocacy, engagement period for any kind of an audience. And when I left, I had some work I did with a company called Kaiser Permanente, and we built the music programs for them. And I did concert series and playlists. And obviously we used music in advertising. At the time, there was a conscious move to go from using Bob Dylan and Bee Gees in advertising to try and using, emerging artists. And that was when I really got a real sense of like, your dollar goes further when you're at a brand by using people who really care. And, Bob Dylan and the Bee Gees are great, and sonically they connect, but they're not going to advocate for your brand. So we were really looking for artists that we could do that with. And that became a full-time, approach for me with music. And when I left Kaiser, my goal was to try and help. I saw a lot of artists that just didn't know their worth. It's a very challenging market. So that was 7 years ago. Yeah.
Cool. Thank you for sharing all that. I know we're going to dive deeper into it as the conversation goes. And Julien, when you were introducing yourself, I'm so intrigued because you shared how data has always been the reason why you came over to the States, and that has been your role since you've been here in practically the majority of your life. So did you always know that being around numbers was something that you wanted to do in this way, or was it something that you discovered later on in life?
No, I think very similar to Kristin. Like until 7 years ago, I didn't know that could be my job. Like it's what I love. Like working with numbers was fun. It was, you could just like use Last.fm and just find fun things to do with it. But at the time, really, like numbers were not part of artists' journeys. It was just something you had to kind of like tell them, hey, you should think about it. So I got very lucky. Like basically, I always wanted to work in the music industry, and same thing. There were actually no programs for it in France. So I just kept doing what I knew how to do, which was being like a web nerd, building websites and things like this. So I never expected that could bring me back into the music industry. But luckily, I just realized I love music data. So honestly, I just Googled like what exists in that spectrum, and I found a company that was solely doing this, and that was kind of like the beginning of all the things happening today in the music world on the data side.
So Kristin, within your role, how have you seen the way that the industry uses analytics shift over the past 3 to 5 years?
I mean, in general, I think well, like Julien was saying, it's like, it wasn't really a thing. And I think people were starting to be like, they always say there's an art and a science, right? So you're looking at the art when you're dealing with the music industry, but you forget that there's actually a science, and there always has been. And any brand has that. But I would say in the last 3 to 5 years, it's gotten a bit more, the conversation's up at the top instead of, like he was saying, the sort of like residual. And I think because of that, it's put a lot of pressure on the technology platforms to allow us insights and access to data points that we didn't have 5 years ago at all. Like, I mean, Julien's working with Pandora Amp. I mean, it's a testament. I think that rolled out last year, right? In beta, and it's been progressing more and more. And now I think every DSP everyone realizes how important it is to put the data in the artist's hands. So I feel like artist-focused data platforms have really been the big, surge. And I think, that's here to stay, hopefully.
Yeah. Also, I feel like a large shift has also been that time in which you receive the data, right? I feel like before it's like, if you're going in the traditional format, when you put out an album, when you release it, and then you see how the album sales do, and sort of that time span could be anywhere 6 months to a year. Right now, I put something on social media, the analytics are showing me who's listening to it, where they're listening to it at, how long they're listening to it, and then I'm immediately can then re-strategize if I need to in order to meet the successes that I'm looking for.
We call that optimization. It's like course correction and innovation. So it's the same thing. Absolutely.
Yes, perfect. And Julien, sort of the same question for you too, is you being someone who's moved from web development to really focusing on how artists can use data to amplify their brand and their careers. How have you seen it shift in the music industry in the past couple of years?
Well, I mean, really now artists are asking for data. That's really the biggest change. And that's I think this is great, because now by putting your content anywhere, you're expecting to get data back. I guess now we kind of have an opposite problem, is that 6 years ago, it was really hard to get, and now there's too much of it. So how do you make sense of the numbers? Because looking at in like 10 tables all day is not going to tell you what to do. So really, I guess the big switch has been like, instead of people, I guess first people didn't know they needed data, then they asked for it, and now the question is more, what should I be doing with this?
Yes.
And this is where we're going.
Yeah.
And I think that's what you both do so well, right? Is they are able to communicate to artists and to brands what to do with this actual data. And so to start, there's so much data to be tracking, right? What actually should I be looking at as an artist, as a brand, as an entity? What should I be looking at? And Kristin, we'll start with you because I know you have a very interesting perspective on this.
Yeah, I mean, like, what shouldn't you be looking at?
Yeah.
So, you know, there's that. It's like every single data point is going to tell you something. And again, when you start with all of this, you're going to hopefully identify what you believe is a goal, right? So like, if you can do that, they call them KPIs, right? Like the key performance indicators. So when you're looking through them, and there's a ton, and I have a document we'll share later, there's a ton of them. And the question is like, what's applicable to you? And what is it that you could even like do something with afterwards? So it might be like, you know, like Julien was saying, like there's that sense of like the data is there, but what's going to be meaningful. So in my world, dealing with, you know, we you know, my hope is to break an artist, I guess you could say, as an independent, so that they can match wits with the labels, whatever level it is. And I would say you want to start with things like, you know, understanding your website analytics. You know, obviously we talked briefly before this, how the importance of metadata is.
Yeah.
That's kind of a given. But like where you use that information later and how that can be helpful for other areas that you're going to actually eventually get payment from, perhaps too, if you're an artist. But if you're working with a team, for instance, like around an artist, things like Google Analytics, Google Ads, making sure your pixels work, all of those things, they're going to tell you just enough information that you know if it's scalable and basically sustainable, right? So like replicable, and does it have a trajectory for growth? So growth is it. It's anything else is just distraction. So like views, everybody talks about views and plays and all that. That's great as a starting point. But where I'm looking at is growth strategies. So you need to make sure that things that you're looking at are something you can do something with. YouTube's a great platform for that. Obviously Pandora, like each one of them have their, you know, sweet spots. But don't just get caught up in the ego of the numbers. I think that's an important piece, you know, like everybody's just, I just need to get the views on something. It's like, no, you can start there, but eventually you need to optimize so that you actually are growing.
Right. Fair, and we're going to talk about the sort of the growth mindset in a minute. Julien, you're coming from the place of really streaming and how artists can utilize their data to grow success, specifically on the Pandora platform. So talk to us more about what data artists are specifically asking for and how you're helping them utilize it.
So I guess what is interesting is, as you know, right now, everyone talks about playlists. So this is what other artists are asking for most. But I think what is important is for each artist to understand each platform.
Right.
The reality is that Pandora works differently than Spotify or Apple Music. Like each platform, like think about each streaming platform as it's like its own ecosystem.
Yeah.
Someone using a platform usually doesn't use another one. On Pandora, reality is that our radio experience is extremely popular still today. I mean, we have on demand and all these things, but artists can really actually gain new fans by being played on the right other artist radios. So as a result, one of my goals is to actually use data and data analytics tools to show it. Like, hey, here's a pie chart. Can you see here that like 70% of your streams are coming from getting played here? Right. That's just find like an interesting way to show them, and also then create products to help them take action on it. Once again, it's always the action. Yeah. Okay, you know what? Give us this information and we can try to play you in even more places. So that's kind of like starting into data to tell the story and then hopefully giving them a button to act on it.
Yeah, that's a good way. I like how you put that, how sort of data is telling a part of your story, right? It's telling your story on where you're going. I'm curious because when specifically within our role in Music Forward, we're always working with artists to help them grow, and we're always trying to figure out what their next step is and to set goals, right? I think something was important is you have to be very intentional about what you want, specifically in the music industry, or anyone can take advantage of you. What does goal setting look like for you, Kristin, when you're working with an artist in discovery mode?
Oh my God, such a great question.
Yeah, thank you.
I mean, look, it's every artist is different. It's, you know, they're what they come to the table with, asset management, what their songs are like, what the genre is like. You know, there's so many things. Like, we work with a blues rock artist, and his work is very different than someone who would be in a pop realm, you know, and you have to work with them. So you start with, like, what do you think would be success? Like, what is it? Touring? Obviously, this is a rough year for touring. Is it radio? Do you need awareness? Do you want to create a conversation for sync and licensing? That's something that's, for me, very important, obviously coming from advertising. So I love using radio. And I think to Pandora and SiriusXM's merger, that's a sweet spot for me, is knowing that, you know, you could spend years building an artist career there, and it can be expensive, but it also has some of the biggest reach. I mean, still, we talk about digital, but radio is like 33% of discovery comes from radio still in some platforms. So if you can afford that, I think that's an important one. So you look at the budget, you look at what you're, you know, is it a single, is it worth it for you to go to radio on this one single, you know what I mean? Like, you have to kind of evaluate each thing. And then you start to build from the ground up. So fundamentals, like having, you know, some kind of, always having a driver if you can, even if it's like cheap, just like $2 or $3 or whatever, $1 a day, just having drivers going to each of the DSPs so you can start to learn how those perform for you. Yeah. And then things like, you know, the playlists are interesting. I don't think it makes us, it's not a strategy. You know, it's a byproduct of doing your job well. Yeah. If you're really building your brand, you know, then they're going to hear about you, or you'll pop up somehow on their radar. I don't, you know, it's just not, to me, it's not sustainable. Because even if you're on the list, it's just not it's not there. So I would say, knowing the artist, knowing the dynamic that they bring to the table, what they're willing to do to promote the songs, you know, are they willing to talk and do videos? Can they, you know, one of our artists, Jessica Childers, she's able to like get on the piano and just play and talk, and she's super engaging. So, you know, her approach might be more organic, you know what I mean? Because we know she can do things on the fly, you know? So, you know, it depends on the artist, but I would definitely say start with your budget and have a realistic look at what you can accomplish with that.
Cool. Thank you for sharing. I think it's really important from what you just said, to take on the fact that, I think, first, I find it very intriguing, your perception on playlisting, and we're going to have a conversation offline to dive deeper into that.
I know. But it's not popular. Yeah. I know that. I know. Yeah.
It's, but I think it's important to goal set as an artist. Julien, specifically with your role in Pandora, and the conversations that you and I have been around how you're helping artists utilize the platform to the best of its ability. I'm curious because, we talked about this a little earlier, is say that I'm an artist and I really want to target a specific demographic. I am a Black artist and I want my audience to reflect that. But you, being on the back end of Pandora, seeing that my music is being received by a total different audience. What is your advice to me? Is your advice for me to follow the analytics, or is it, what do I need to do to be targeting that specific demographic?
Oh, wow. That's a very interesting question.
I'm feeling really good today, everybody.
No. I mean, what I would say about Pandora is that so the way it works, your music is getting listened by music analysts that actually list like one of like 100 or more, actually, music genes, like it's probably like the Pandora genome. So like your music is supposed to get played to other listeners that just like some of the aspects of it. So it's supposed to be very qualitative. That's what I really like about the platform, is that I guess the end goal of Pandora is just to play the best music at all times to your listeners. So I guess the assumption is that wherever you're getting played is supposedly people that actually really want to listen to it. So I don't know if we're getting an advice for this. Not really. I guess this is a case where, I guess through your other social platforms, like I guess direct your fans into Pandora to, I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. I don't really have an answer to that.
Yeah, Kristen, how
Can I
about
jump in?
you?
Yeah, I was gonna say, we had this interesting experience with, so Shelly Peiken is an artist who we work with. She wrote Bitch and What a Girl Wants, you know her, obviously. When we started releasing her music, we noticed a very significant, consistent and significant, Shazams and, ingestion. People are listening to her music in Russia. We have no idea how it's happening still. You have no idea how much time I've spent trying to do this. But what we decided to do when the album came out was like, let's go to the DSP in Russia and just be like, okay, guys, I can't explain this, but can you get behind this somehow? Yeah. So, it's taking advantage of it. Maybe, they always say pivot, but like lean in to what you're learning. And he's right. Like there's some platforms you can't do anything about. It's just learning. And you could reflect it in other targeting or other areas that you might be like, well, let's do a split test in this particular area and find out if that makes more, gives it more traction. But it's, when it comes to the DSPs, I don't really think he's right. Like you can't change that outlet. That's just a design piece that's what they think is the right thing to do. It can be frustrating, but also revealing.
For our audience, can you break down DSP for us?
Oh yeah, sorry, digital service provider. Sorry.
Thank you.
It's a distribution channel. Yeah, it's the Spotify's, the Pandoras, the Apple Musics, the Amazon. Yeah, all that.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you. I want to take a question from our audience right now. So Jasmine asked, have there been any key shifts in listening patterns for artists in light of the pandemic? And how has goal setting for these artists adjusted accordingly? Julien, we'll start with you, and then Kristin, if you have anything, we'll take you as well.
That's a good question. I don't have like specific numbers or anything. I just know that like in general, people used to listen less on the weekends. People like listening was kind of like part of the habit of going to work and being at work and things like this. So you can see that things evolved in a way that is like maybe a little more flat. I don't really have any specific data about trends besides that. Okay.
Kristin, how about you?
Yeah. I mean, I would say, in the beginning of the situation we're in, they were saying that like classical music was up, children's music was up, right? There were lots of instrumental, things like that, which made sense because there were all of a sudden like everybody sharing a device, in the home. I also have read, and I want to say this came from Pandora, that live streaming, live music sound, you know what I mean? So basically, like if you had a live album, that started going up again in like June, July. So that was, for me, with artists that perform live all the time, that was really hopeful because you really want, that starts to realize like people are missing the live experience. So that was the other insight that I saw come recently too.
Oh, I love that.
We also have seen
that obviously, makes you wonder like how fast can we get a live album out?
There is, I mean, that's an important thing to know, and something we've heard on other panels too, is that streaming has been down because, again, I think Julie, you might have alluded to this earlier, but like, people aren't in their cars listening to music anymore, right? Everyone's at home, everyone's working. But there has been, and Kristin, you were just talking about this now, is that there's been this hunger for live music. So the live streaming, the going live on Instagram, those type of opportunities for artists specifically have been something that has grown, and audience members and fans are hungry for. And it's been interesting because there hasn't been a lot of data pulled from the live streaming aspect, because even in the conversations that I'm having with other panelists on different sessions there hasn't really been I won't say strategy, but a formula figured out for going live, and then what is the data behind live streaming that you can use to amplify your brand or your artistry. So I think that's still a space that we're figuring out.
There's been some things, but I mean, it's definitely it's not going away. So what you're talking about is absolutely right. There's no real standardization of like, what's a performance metric. I mean, obviously you want to keep people on as long as you can, but since they're not paying for it, I think what we've learned is if you pay for it, you stay way more engaged. So that's the other part of that, but live streaming is definitely like, if you think about the future of all of this, it's the future. It's going to stay as a pillar in there's no going back. The Pandora's box is open. So it's like, you have to start figuring out what your strategy looks like to include that. But I think the challenges there are significant. And some of it is, you know, establishing tracking like on your own end. You know, we do a live show on Controls. I do a live show every Tuesday night, and our team has been monitoring on, you know, we cross post to the artist platforms and our own, and we monitor every single like and comment and everything. So we know, you know, if it's growing or not. And actually we keep our own databases just to understand on each of the socials what's grown during this time and before that too. It's up to us really to determine these things. We have to figure this. We just have to start quantifying it somehow, and over time you'll see the, you know, how it performs.
What Gabriel asked from our audience, what are the most powerful back-end data points on DSPs? And this could be for either of you.
Why don't you put that document up?
I know. I'm trying to, so everyone knows, Kristin shared a document with me before this call, which is actually amazing. And it breaks down KPIs and Google Analytics. And I want to share. My screen is currently frozen, so I can't.
Oh, is that it?
Yes, that's what it is. But we're going to share it with everyone in our audience after this call today. Kristin, in lieu of the document, please share what are the important data points in the back end of DSPs.
Okay, so I would say, like I was talking about initially, you know, your Google Analytics is a really important one. Make sure your website has some kind of a tracking mechanism. You know, everyone forgets, but the email is still the #1 thing you're going to want to get from someone, because if you can engage them, it's like they said it was worth $1, but now I feel like it's probably worth 20. It's just, if you can keep them in your ecosystem, buying your merch, going to your live shows, playing your song, sharing your music, it's a one-on-one, and that's what you need all the time. So I'd say I'm going to always start with some kind of a website analytic, #1. And then I would say from there, it's going to be like, make sure you've got pixels like set and ready to go. And used like Next Big Sound. So I think, Julien, we probably met like 6 years ago, because when I first got involved, I would write to Next Big Sound all the time, because they were the only ones that could put it together in these like worlds that you could start to see how things were performing. So make sure that all of your data points are in something like Next Big Sound properly, or Chartmetric, which is another one that's an industry standard too. And you know, to be able to learn how to track those things. And then there's obviously Instagram. And I mean, I'm a big fan of YouTube discovery platforms, but again, make sure that stuff is, you know, end cards on YouTube. People forget about things that can keep you in, you know, so, because otherwise they'll just go away. You might get them, but they'll go away. So there's things like that. I don't know, hopefully, I mean, there's so many bands in town. Oh my God, don't get started bands in town. Like, that's a big one too, because that's another one-on-one conversation you can have with your fan base. So you know, the bigger you grow that, the more you can be like, hey, I have a show. Hey, I have a single coming out. Hey, I have a video coming out. It's a communication strategy.
100%.
Think about how to communicate.
I think just to add to that, like really like first step is, as soon as you distribute your music, go manually on each streaming platform, make sure it looks right. Because I can assure you that if your artist name is the same as another artist, there's a big chance one of the many streaming platforms got it wrong. Like basically like distributors like send us all the content the same way, but each platform decides to, I guess, filter it differently. So I think just like your homework is like, as soon as you have a release, go on each streaming platform. If they have any way to give you access to an artist's dashboard, claim it, get your profile right, and see any action they allow you to do. But like really like making sure your music is accessible, I think is like the first step on getting any data about it.
Julien, what do you
if I can
go ahead?
We start that at 9 p.m. on the night that the single releases, the night before, because it starts on Friday, but by 9 p.m. in California, we can see everything. And the very first thing we all do is, I mean, everything transfers over, and then you test every single platform, including, you know, Amazon Music is a big one that's very challenging, because speaking the name of an artist, that's like, I think people forget about that. But if you look at Amazon Music numbers, which you can now see if you're an artist as well, you can tell on your heat map how things, like if people are actually saying your name. So you want to like encourage people. The Amazon Play thing is a good one too. But those smart speakers, you know, they're dominating more and more now that we're home. So, you know, don't overlook those types of things either.
Oh, that's a good
Great point, Julian.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for both sharing that. Julian, what do you say to someone? What do you say to a young artist that's utilizing, whether it was Next Big Sound or Pandora, like analytics aren't my thing, numbers are not my thing. What is the advice that you're giving them? Because I think hesitation for a lot of artists is that's never been something that I've utilized in my day-to-day life, and I'm expected to be an analytic major or whatever you want to call it. So what is your advice to them directly?
I mean, this is a great question that I get a lot. I think like the biggest trick is like just don't compare yourself to too big of artists. It doesn't make any sense. There's one Drake. So I think like a real big thing to understand really is the difference between your reach and your engagement, like addressable audience and the way they react to what you do. Because you know what, everyone starts from zero. So that's why like I've been working on the Next Big Sound side about some like analytics visualization to like help artists see how their engagement is doing compared to other artists of the same size. Even if you have 100 Facebook likes, you know what, maybe having like 100 like Facebook fans, like maybe having like, you know, 5 likes on your post actually is better than most. So I think it's just really important to like see your data at the point where you are in your career, because just things go, like just grow your reach and make sure to keep your fans engaged.
Kristin, did you have anything to add?
Yeah, I mean, look, the very first thing I always say is trusted source, advocacy, referrals. It's all about the engagement, people. You know, that's where it's at. So if you could do, you know, if there's ways for you to just make sure that people are moving the needle for you on your behalf too, that's probably the other part to it too. But engagement is everything. It's just making sure you understand what conversions could look like for you. It's not the same for everyone.
Yeah.
Just like Julian said.
Yeah. And I think also something to note too is that as we're talking about DSPs and throughout this conversation is that they've been set up to support emerging artists. And to your point, Kristin, too, is who's that person that is in your network or in your life that can sort of read these analytics to help you boost your career? It's all about building your team. I don't think it all has to be on that one person. Kristin, you've been speaking.
But you know what? I will just say this much though too, and I tell this to a lot of artists. You know, you're no longer able to just sit back and play music. It's unfortunate. It's just the world it's just changed. So if you don't have a team, you know, and even if you do, it's really good for you to understand some of these pieces too. You might not have to do them all, but just make sure you know, because I think the reason why I do what I do is to try and educate and inform people about what their worth is. And some of these pieces are really like teaching you what your worth is and how you can grow your worth. So it's sort of like your own bank account. That's all
It's a good way to look at it. I like that analogy. Kristin, you were talking specifically, and Julien, you as well, when we talked earlier, we were speaking about goal setting, right? And where that comes into play. I'm curious on when dealing with your data, how are you defining success, right? How can an artist look at their data and say, we're using these metrics, I know that I have been successful. And Kristin, we'll start with you. Sort of what does success look like when using data and analytics for the things that you're working on?
I mean, I get excited. I get excited to get the emails on Fridays that say, this is your week's growth, and like, you know, Apple Music and Spotify and Pandora, like all of the things, like everything combined. So, you know, what we try to do is understand incremental growth, right? So each week you're seeing something move. It's one way or the other. As long as it's, you know, and some weeks might be a step back because maybe you're not doing a release or you're not in the market as much, right? So you have to kind of understand that timing is everything. So when you're going into a strategy where you're releasing music or releasing a video or releasing some, you know, doing a live stream, then the metrics for success there are going to be very different than when you're not in that cycle. So I'm looking for things like, you know, saves, shares on songs, right? So I'm sure Julien probably feels the same way about Pandora. It's like, you know, you don't want it to just be about the stream. You want to know, did somebody stop and Shazam that? Did somebody stop and save it? Did they add it to a playlist? You know, are they coming back? Is there on your website? Can you see if there's unique individuals coming in versus, you know, the same person over and over again? Are you creating super fans? Like, you know, are you selling merch of any sort? Can you create a dialogue with your fans, you know, that actually has potential for them to help carry the ball for you? You know, we build communities around our artists. I started Uncut Jewels to do that because, you know, in certain times, it's like I always say, like when one rises, they all lift. The boat goes up for everybody. So, you know, safety in numbers too. And that is a part of success, is that you're not an island, you're not alone, that you have people who are with you. So it varies. I'd say, you know, for me, when you go to radio, I want to see Shazams. I want to see frequency of spins. I want to see day parts. I want to know that that people care. You know, I mean, they're like I said, each platform has a different way of looking at it, but I come back to the ones that are, you know, noticeably, you know, that there's growth in it, even if it's small, that, you know, you could maybe go in and for another, you know, few dollars here or another release here, leverage that information.
Julien, what data points are you specifically using with Pandora and streaming that allow you to measure success?
I mean, that's like, so it always goes into how do we define success, right? Every artist is working towards something different.
Right.
I think for me, it's more about making sure that each data point you look at, you contextualize it. Like, it really, I think, is important to not just look at the overall big number, like we said earlier, just like, okay, where are these streams coming from? How are people discovering me? Can I do more here? Can I engage with them? So it's more like, I don't know, yeah, just really like every stream comes from somewhere. Yeah. There's always a different story. The more you understand it, the more you can make decisions on it, and I guess define success there.
Yeah. And Kristin, I think you and I in our first initial conversation, we talked a little bit about this, but using your analytics to really to translate into dollars, right? And so how can artists and brands really use analytics and translate that into different revenue streams?
I mean, it's so, you know, those things are a lot more challenging to do because of obviously not being able to do. So the one thing that was a big wake up call for me in this industry is there is no one clean way to spend $1 on an ad and then know exactly what happened with that stream, or, you know what I mean? Like, did that user do something? Like there's so many non-communicating system pieces that there is no real ROI. So I'm just going to caveat by saying that, you know, it's really upside down. For every $1 you spend, you maybe earn like a fraction of a penny. That's the way it is. So this industry is a little different. And when you're looking at monetization, that's where intellectual property comes in, knowing that you're building a catalog that people are going to listen to over and over again. That basically then you can go to sync and licensing agents, and you can do something like, hey, you know, I've been building this out. Do you know, like, to work and within that space and try and monetize the actual songs. And then I think, you know, you're going to have, from that, you might have, like, you know, recognition that leads you to touring and things like that. You know what I mean? So for me, it's still about non-digital monetization platforms that come from knowing you have the data points that people are looking for, so that you can actually be like, I'm an artist that's of substance, and, you know, we can, if you give me a sync opportunity, I'm going to make this something for, you know, your platform for your TV show as well.
Yeah, all fair points. Julien, your career has been centered around, again, helping artists use data, right, successfully. What have been some of your biggest challenges when working in this arena with artists?
Oh, challenges. I don't know. I mean, honestly, like now, I mean, if, like, the fact that there's so many streaming platforms, obviously a challenge is to make them care about each of them, because you never really know where something can take off. Like, the reality is, like, each platform is its own world. So I think, like, I mean, I don't know if there's really challenges. Really, I feel like, if anything, the challenge is to make sure artists use all the tools accessible to them. Yeah. Just something that Pandora does that not all artists knows all the time, but, like, we allow artists to geo-target audio messages for free to anyone listening to them on Pandora. So, like, if they go on a tour, they can just, like, talk to everyone in Chicago and just say, hey, we're playing at this specific venue on this day, click here to buy a ticket. So really, our goal is to help artists also grow their career outside of the platform. Like Pandora can be their reach, and they can try to engage these people into, I guess, see them in the real world.
Something that always comes up when we're doing these sessions is you talked about these different platforms being ecosystems earlier, which I think is a great way to describe them. And when I say platforms, I mean DSP specifically. And so is your advice that we should be putting all of our effort into all these different ecosystems, or would you advise sort of focusing 100% of my energy specifically on 1 to 3 of these ecosystems?
Is it for me?
Yes.
I think
it's like Pandora.
Yeah, in the camera,
no.
I was looking directly at you, but I understand you can't.
No, I mean, I think it's a great question. To be honest with you, I think the first thing should be to just be a great artist, make great songs. Like, I mean, you don't make a career out of one streaming platform. I think that would be a big mistake. So I think, like, if anything, I think something that was mentioned earlier about like playlists are kind of reactions to what happens in the real world too. So by just like growing your fans on your own socials and whatever, like playing shows, I think people coming to see you play, things are going to be reacting. I guess what I think is very important though is to make sure to still look at what's happening, because if one of the platforms starts to take off, then they may have ways for you to actually act on it and just make it go faster. But I would just say main thing obviously is to make great music, make it accessible to everything. Your fans shouldn't have to go out of their way to listen to you. So yeah, just be accessible and just keep an eye on the data and make sure you don't miss any opportunities.
Kristin, did you have anything to add there?
Yeah, it's interesting. So, I mean, my artists are not, we're not trying to be trendy and hip and cool, right? So we're trying to build a catalog. We're trying to build something that's going to last the test of time. And so the challenges that we face, I believe, are, everybody talks about TikTok and all of these trendy platforms, and that's great. And, I think up to the artist to decide how to use it, but maintaining a sense of authenticity, meaningful engagement, meaningful conversation. Do something that is right for you, not because the industry is telling you to do it. You have to know who you are. And if it feels inauthentic, and I've been, I'm a manager, I'm like, what about TikTok? And, each one of them is like, oh, I don't know. And so then we have to figure out, is it a strategy that we want? Is there a tactic in there we can test? You know what I mean? But don't fall prey to trying to be everything to everybody. For me, it just feels like being inauthentic is a really fast way to lose a focus entirely.
So I have a question sort of along that line, Kristin, which is, from the brand perspective, as an artist, what are brands and advertisements looking for in my own data to know that I'm able to whether represent them or to partner with them? What do they want to know I can do and bring to the table?
Yeah. I mean, they're looking at everything. We've reached out to like sneaker companies, and they're like, your artists aren't using our sneakers. You know what I mean? Like, they want to know you're really a potential partner. And when you really are, it's pretty obvious. It's like, I wear your stuff or I use your product, and you'll be talking about it. So they'll know, you're there. But again, they're a lot more savvy now than they ever have been. So I would say, when I was building the brands, we would build a sonic brand out of what a brand strategy would be. And so for Kaiser, it would be like confidence in the music. Well, you can't just put in a depressing song to a playlist that way. So making sure that you're, coordinate, like that it's appropriate, that again, that it actually fits with the brand strategy, their brand strategy.
Perfect. Thank you. That's good advice for our audience. Julien, specific question for you from our audience. The question is, I'm a current senior undergraduate studying and majoring in statistics. What are things I need to prepare to pursue a career as a data analyst in the music industry?
Oh, this is great. I mean, I guess what is amazing is that right now this is actually like a role, which wasn't the case recently. So I would advise to just start anywhere. Like I know like a lot of our interns end up being full-time. I mean, I started as an intern myself. So, I mean, yeah, I don't know. I mean, I to be honest with you, like I got my job by just making fun data visualization on my own. And I just emailed them to that company, and they liked it. And so I guess the reality is like a lot of data is available for free to everyone. I think there's a lot of great stories to tell with data. I would definitely advise to try to find an angle, post it somewhere, post like something on Medium, and try to get some traction about it.
Yeah. Well, let's break it down a little more. So what do you feel are the skills that you possess that allow you to be successful in your job?
Well, so now I'm a product manager. So honestly, my role is to work with a lot of different people, different skills, data scientists, designers, engineers. So I guess my skill involves like a lot of empathy, really understanding how people are thinking and making sure that we can find like a good middle ground to build something great. Yeah. And I mean, to be honest, like something that is important is also being a music fan. I mean, this is like I'm very lucky that everyone I work with is, you know, playing music in some way and things like this. So, I mean, yeah, just do something. This is like Kristin likes records as much as I do. I think this is like, we're all in this for the same thing. We all love music. We all want to
play more records.
That's good. Very good timing, Kristin.
Final.
But Julien, yeah, I think what you're saying is definitely right on the money, where it's really about finding opportunity that's related to what you want to do and what you love, and then also just being consistent in what you're asking for. And I think that's exactly what this particular audience member is looking to glean from this conversation. Kristin, my question from the audience for you is really talking about you talked about budgeting earlier, right? And I think there's always this conversation, specifically with emerging and independent artists, which is budget. Like I either have some money or I have no money, right? And so, what does a timeline and a strategy look like with a limited budget?
With unlimited?
With limited. With limited.
Sorry. With the limited budget. Okay, so first of all, you got to give yourself at least 6 to 8 weeks for a release of a single. Okay. And ideally you have an asset that's a visual asset to go along with it too. So I always say, like, please don't come to me with, yeah, I want to release it next month. It's like, you need a run-up time. Mostly because we need to give notifications to people like the good people at Pandora and like, this is coming and we really believe in it. And what do you think? And, you know, go from there. So that's important. I would say start small, right? You don't have to spend everything that first week. It's a marathon you're running. So I know people get really excited about PR and all that stuff. And that's great. It's important to get quotes and good things. And hopefully, you know, you have a song that gets into, like, I don't know, Consequence of Sound or something like that, that's awesome. But again, you know, you're going to be responsible for drivers that you can control. When you do a marketing plan, that's what they're looking for. They're looking for all of the things that you're going to be doing to make sure that people notice your song. So even if you only have $250 to market, you still can do things like, look, I'm going to just also caveat by saying I have taken part in the Stop Hate for Profit campaign. So we really try to avoid Facebook and Instagram ads because of that. So we've learned a lot this summer about Pinterest. There's other platforms that are just as great for discovery. Pinterest is a really interesting one. Obviously we love YouTube ads. So I would focus on, you know, if you have to do Facebook and Instagram, swipe up campaigns for Instagram don't cost you much. Facebook campaigns are very inexpensive and can be highly effective. Make sure you have people paying attention to you before you release the music. So do a little campaign in the run up just to make sure people are like, oh, seeing your stuff and that you're boosting a couple posts or whatever. But like, ultimately, you're going to want to spend the money on the somehow like awareness of the song. So if it's on YouTube or video, or even if it's the track art, you know what I mean? Sometimes that can be highly effective too. Again, look at the discovery platforms. There are so many of them. I do like literally integrated campaigns. So we try to hit every single DSP, every single platform that we can. And even if it's like $10 a pop, try it, learn it, understand it, optimize. Did that work or not? 2 weeks into it, you can go back in and add more if you want. But I would say you can start small and just keep it focused. And also Feature FM is a really great tool to understand analytics too. We haven't really touched on that, but I've been using those since day one, and even the free versions can give you a lot of insights on where things are coming. And don't forget to pre-save. It's a little less of a thing now, I think, but if you can get like 1,000 people to pre-save your song, dude, that's gonna pop up the algorithm for you.
That actually,
and free things, the free things. Pandora ads are amazing.
Yeah.
We love Pandora ads because they're free. You can do feature track ads. There's so many, there's just so many things you can do right now. And yeah, it's really in your hands to do it. Bands in town emails, we do a ton of those. Those are free. So just make sure to build your audience, and then you can treat yourself like a brand.
Yeah. And I think that's important to take away from that too, is that as an artist, you are a full brand and have to operate like one. This leads me into our next question from our audience, which Fernanda says, I produced an artist's first release and the song made the artist reach 12,000 monthly listeners without any campaign. Then a couple months passed and the numbers went down. After releasing a couple songs, the artist never got the same numbers again. What do you recommend doing? Julien, I'm curious to hear your thoughts on this. And Kristin,
well, first, that's a huge start. I really would start by understanding, like, where were these streams coming from? What happened? There's always something, like I said. So was it because they were tested on a certain playlist or something like this? Then, like, I guess the most important thing is, like, how can you turn these people that listen to your song once into people you can talk to? I guess like an example was like the pre-save, but like making sure that your fans subscribe to your artist page, because so they get that notification anytime you release something.
Right.
So for that one, really understand the story, what happened the first time, and kind of tweak it. But that was a great idea to keep releasing music. So yeah. I would love to hear more about what happened there.
Yes. Kristin, what do you have to add to that?
I mean, when I hear monthly listeners, I'm like, well, that doesn't really tell you much except that people added it to playlists. But like, did it convert to anything? How many followers did you get out of that first thing? And what was the trajectory of growth from that? So like, I'm going to reverse out to find the number that you own. You know what I mean? The monthly listeners is that's the world. But what are you playing with? So yeah, I would say, releasing music is a strategy. You just have to keep at it. And also I think the other thing people are doing now, which I really do like, are alternate versions of songs too, because that can start to get you back into like, maybe there's another version of the song that could be playlisted. So
yeah, I feel like the moderators in our presidential debate, but I want to spend like only 2 minutes on the next segment because I know it's going to take us everywhere. Briefly, explain to our audience metadata and how to use it. And I know that I'm saying briefly is not a thing, but Julien, starting with you, what your understanding of metadata and how artists can utilize that to grow their careers.
So we talked about it briefly. It's not something fun. It's just really getting your house in order, like making sure that as an artist you exist within who you are everywhere. And that's kind of like the trick here. Like I said, like it starts at the distributor level, making sure like you send your music, every single DSP that is listed that they distribute to, you gotta go there, making sure you have there to make sure you claim your artist page. And that applies to everything. I guess the big advice I would give is every platform you see, if you see like, okay, concerts listed by Songkick, you gotta go on Songkick, you gotta get your artist thing, you gotta making sure like all the things are linked, that your artists exist in the way it should everywhere. I think this is a way to start, but I would love to hear what Kristin has to say.
Kristin?
I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, probably when I don't get angry often, I'm Italian, but when I do get angry, it's because we missed an opportunity to socialize something because we didn't have the information properly ingested. So song credits, you got to write the writer of the song, the producer of the song, make sure that stuff is ingested when you're putting it into these platforms, because that's not their job. It's our job to make sure that that's right. And, add it in a way that they know, oh, this is where this goes. So that's first and foremost, because that's just respect. Yeah. You want to, you know what I mean? Like, especially if you were working with someone, that's a respect thing. Then I think as far as the metadata is concerned, you're going to spend most of your time making sure that the instrumentalists are written out, again, for neighboring rights. It doesn't happen in America, but if you do go to radio, or if you do get an airplay, if you get a TV show somewhere in Europe, or anything happens globally, neighboring rights can actually pay royalties to people who were performing on your thing, on your song. So again, honoring your own world, but spend the time to add in your ISRC code, your UPC code, all of that stuff, the editor, the engineer, people who mastered it, where it was mastered, all of that information. There's a document that's You could probably Google it. It's pretty much an industry standard. There's like, I think it's like maybe 45 boxes across one way that you just per song that you're adding everything in. And like Julien said, it's not fun, but it's the meat and potatoes of how you know your song is going to make, you know, money for you later. And, you know, when it comes to sync and licensing, you know, that's unforgivable to not have that stuff ingested into a, you know, the actual song itself too. You know, oftentimes people forget that that MP3 that you're sending out, because you can't do it on a WAV file, but you can do it on MP3, should be loaded up with, how do you contact the person who is responsible for this? Like, make sure you use the notes section, put your email address and your phone number in there, you know, for use, contact us. And then make sure you have all the information, even put it on in that doc, in that little file, because it can help you just when you're cascading things that people don't have to, you know, they're not confused by it. So again, it's just a matter of housekeeping.
Yeah, thank you both for sharing all of this knowledge on this session. I want to bring us to a close by asking a final question around the future and what that looks like. Julien, for Pandora, for your role with at Pandora, what do you think that's going to look like in the next 5 years?
Oh, wow.
or even I think just in the times we're at in the next year.
I mean, really, just I want to be able to introduce more tools for artists to engage with their fans. I think this is really this is what I'm most excited about. I love the idea that an artist can talk to people listening to them, and then convert them really into real people, into real fans. To really get out of just the stream and just create like more connection between artists and their fans. So that's what I think. That's where things I hope are going all around.
Kristin, how about you? Someone who's working with independent artists, really diving deep into helping them discover who they are and what they want. What does someone in your role, what's the future look like for you?
I mean, I'm going to go pretty big, I guess. I do, first of all, live streaming is here to stay. I said that before. So people need to figure out how to make that more engaging. That's number one. But I also feel like we're watching the record industry, the recording industry shifting seismically underneath our feet. And I think that artists are now more empowered to do things that they've never been able to do before. And again, you know, fragmentation exists, but if you're consistent in your messaging and consistent in how you're putting things out, you can build a brand that you won't need a label for. Yeah. And eventually when they come around, you're going to be like, I kind of got this. So to me, the future is less about the label conversation and more about what we're doing collectively as a community to build each other up. Yeah. and create, like, you know, environments that we all can exist in and just be like, oh, hey, so-and-so is doing a tour. What about these people? And you have these communities that are more important than the label. The label has the deep pockets right now and these communities. So what I'm trying to figure out is like where we can, you know, what we can do with our own pockets. Maybe they're not as deep, but they're still impactful, and then build a sense of a world around artists so that they can keep doing it independently. It's just, it's confusing to me. I don't feel like the label, I'd love to see labels just not be the quest.
Yes. Well, thank you so much for you both being here today and sharing everything around music and analytics. I think I learned a lot as your moderator, but I think our audience really took a lot out of today's session. For those of you who are joining us today, remember to fill out your survey after you close out of our session today, as well as we will be talking about more careers in technology in our career development workshop tomorrow at 3 o'clock. So to sign up for that, go to hobmusicforward.org/events. Julien, Kristin, thank you so much again for being here. I look forward to speaking to you again in the near future.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good evening, everyone.
You too.